Welcome to Threat Insights weekly group meeting. We have a loose agenda, and Savash has our first topic. I'll let you go ahead, Savash.
Yeah, thanks, Lucy. So the topic is regarding the enum that is lately being introduced with an MR that Mihal submitted. So in that one, there is this origin enum which accepts a value that is API, I guess. So the question that I posed was that if we're going to use API, then it might be difficult for us in the future to distinguish between manually created vulnerabilities versus vulnerabilities created by scanners. I think I left a few comments and Mihal replied them, but then I replied back. So I think it's a good occasion for us to discuss it here. So the concern is that if we use API as an origin, we in the future, or is there a plan? Sorry, is there a plan to distinguish between manually created vulnerabilities and the ones found by the scanners? Because probably we will need to filter them in the UI, right, Matt? Like using a filter. Will we have a filter where we say just show me the vulnerabilities created manually?
So I just closed that merge request. It stems from the issue that, okay, so basically every vulnerability has a report type. And the GraphQL mutation that we are planning to use for the user interface will create vulnerabilities with the report type of generic. I was under the impression that you could integrate a custom scanner in the GitLab CI.yml file, which would ingest some kind of arbitrary report you could make up. And I figured out if you can do that, then you could possibly create a vulnerability with report type of generic, which would be actually created by the security scanner. And my thinking was like, oh boy, this breaks our assumption. Because the assumption was that every vulnerability with the report type of generic has to be created by that GraphQL mutation. It turns out that you cannot fool the ingestion process because it's hardwired. If you name a report, if you have a CI configuration and you create an artifact with the report type of AP fuzzing, it doesn't matter if the scanner reports it as a generic, as a DAST or a SAST scan or whatever. The vulnerabilities created are going to be categorized under API fuzzing, which means you cannot fool the security scanners to create different report types. So this is not a problem. And to sum it up, basically, any vulnerability created by the GraphQL mutation will have the report type set to generic. And this is what we can use to differentiate between vulnerabilities created by the API call or by the user interface and the vulnerabilities coming from the security scanners. So the origin, technically speaking, is no longer needed. I thought basically you could fool the security scanner to create a different type of the vulnerability than it's supposed to, but I just tested it manually on my GDK and it does not happen. You cannot fool it. If you say in the GitLab CI configuration that this particular artifact stores API fuzzing results, even if you edit the artifact itself and change the scanner type to to generic, it doesn't fool it. It still creates API fuzzing vulnerabilities.
So this means that when a vulnerability has the report type generic, it means that it's 100%. We're sure that it's created manually.
And this brings me to another point. Recently, I kind of realized we have this thing called Starboard Vulnerability Create Service, which creates vulnerabilities based on Starboard. I think that's a container security that's a container scanner, and it sets its report type to cluster image scanning, which shouldn't create report type generic vulnerabilities. So we're safe on that front. So basically, you can use report type generic to filter out vulnerabilities that have been created manually.
Okay, because I guess, Matt, we will filter them on the vulnerability report page. We will filter them, right? And we will allow users to filter only and to display only vulnerabilities that were created manually. That's the intention, I guess.
Matt.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm kind of looking through the designs again real quick just to make sure, but it seems like we might do something slightly differently since we've tied the filters are basically report type for GitLab is kind of the same thing as kind of like the name. But like when we integrate a third-party scanner, it appears separately under the vendor's name and then the report type. So I think we may have something additional like that, like anything that has a generic schema would go in a like a header that might say, you know, manual finding. So I'm trying to find the design for it's not explicit. I don't think I'll need to talk to Andy about that just to make sure. But then each of the enum types like code review, bug bounty or whatever, I think would appear underneath those as individual filters. You can kind of see that on the very first design in the design issue where he's got manual finding. It's kind of the name, and then underneath it, he's got code review in one of the examples, but he doesn't have the filter explicitly on.
Okay,
there.
so the manual is like the header, and then code review is a subheader. So it's like subcategory. Is that true?
Yeah, I think so. Looking at that, or actually, I'll share my screen so we're all looking at the same thing. In the design example, get the Slack control out of the way. There we go. Yeah, so we've got like today, the GitLab header has secret detection, dependency scanning, SAST, and DAST by report type. I would expect to see manual finding would probably be here in this dropdown as a header, and then code review is one of the options. And then if you had, bug bounty or if you had whatever else is in the enum are the sub values under that header.
So scan type is the report type, I guess, in the backend, right, Michal?
Yes, scan type. I think it's differently named in actual what we have right now.
We just renamed that to tool, didn't we?
Yeah, also that's true.
Right,
Yes.
because it's going to be stuff that's not tools anymore. I think this is
so
in between. Needs
in the current iteration, we have a report type of generic, and generic would show up under the scan type.
I know this is kind of inverting the way that it works now.
And if you want, and we also have what I mentioned to you yesterday, we have also detection method, which would be another filter. And I imagine that detection method would be code review. The value we have, like we have this XSS cross-site scripting, it has manual finding, and the method is code review. So I imagine we would have two filters, report type, which would be generic, or we could rename it to manual finding. And we would have also a different filter for the detection method.
Well, I guess that's why I'm saying it's a little bit different, because right now we use the schema type lumped under a vendor. I would almost treat the generic schema type like a vendor, making it its own header. So if you could keep it in the same filter, but I realize that we're pulling different pieces of information to construct those. So we would be using the the detection type. I mean, really, I think part of this is being driven from the realization that we needed to have a schema type to validate this against. And that's where the generic one came from. I think if we had well, if we weren't using the schema types to drive all these and we were just focused on what it actually was, the detection method, like a code review or a bug bounty, it'd be a little bit more straightforward. But I think we're kind of in one of those situations where the back end or the technical component of it is making it more complicated on the front end, what the user should see. I think this will make more sense too. And we're just sort of looking at a static picture and it's not the picture that I want to demonstrate. So let me work with Andy, or I can probably even mock something up pretty quickly to show what I think it should look like. And then you can tell me that that's never going to work and we'll need to rethink it.
I'm not the one who's gonna tell you that it's not gonna work, because we can make it work, but it's going to require significant amount of work to make it work differently right now. Because like we have this security scanner integration, which means that if you don't want to use our internal the scanners that GitLab provides, you can somehow integrate your own scanner in the GitLab CI .yml file, which uses the artifact reports keyword, that you can say, hey, this particular CI job is going to give you the results of an API fuzzer or I don't know, DAST scanner or a SAST scanner. And we're expecting those scanners to adhere to some kind of schema. And the generic schema here is, we have no clue what you're going to provide us, so we're going to do our best to deal with it.
My understanding is that we still need to figure out the exact details for this. So regarding the manually created vulnerabilities, should we just add a column and then say this is manually created, so that in the future we don't have backward compatibility issues in the database? Would that work? Adding a column and then just say it's maybe on and off?
I'm not sure what you mean by that. We basically engineered in that way, so you can create manual vulnerabilities, and keeping the data compatible. I mean, I did have to hard code some values, because like we don't expect the user reporting the vulnerability to like provide us with a scanner name, because there is no scanner to begin with. I mean, if the vulnerability was created manually by the users, it can mean that either that user is manually importing the data from a scanner, security scanner, which is like, I'm not sure why. And the other possibility is that the user basically found the vulnerability himself. And in that sense, scanner name makes no sense. Requiring the user to give us a scanner name makes no sense to me. So I hard coded the scanner name like manual scanning or something like that.
Yes, but from my understanding right now, apart from the report type being generic, there is no way for us to distinguish between a manually created vulnerability and the scanner.
Yes.
So would just adding a new column and then in the database and then saying, okay, this is is manually created or something like that, and then having it true or false would help us to distinguish in the future? Because from my understanding, it's still like we still need to iterate on the design and right, Matt. So maybe a future, if we think about the future, maybe just having a column would solve a lot of problems.
Maybe. I guess I'm not sure that we need an extra column though.
I mean, the current assumption is that if a report type is generic, then the vulnerability was created manually. You don't need a flag for this.
Yes, but in the past we had some assumptions that in the future it changed, so it created some backwards compatibility problems. And right now we're, for instance, stuck with those decisions. We cannot go back. So I'm just asking: is this another moment like that, or we're completely sure that generic will not be used for something else?
If it turns out that we actually want to support some kind, if we actually manage to somehow create a generic vulnerability report schema, and we actually want to support that in a security scanner, then if at some point we realize that's the case, we can take all the vulnerabilities that have been created manually and have the report type of generic. We can do something with them. We can migrate them. We can change the report type. We can perform data migration at that point, because we will have the knowledge that any vulnerability with the report type of generic was created manually. That's the assumption.
Okay, so we have a workaround for that.
Yes, if it turns out we have a generic report schema for a security scanner, then we can start supporting it. But before that, we will need to migrate the manually created vulnerabilities to a different report type, or maybe perhaps we could add back the origin field, which I initially proposed, but it doesn't matter at this point. We can discuss it if we have a generic report, if we have a generic vulnerability report schema, which doesn't look to be the case to me. At least we were talking about it, but I don't think we ever got past talking about doing that.
Yeah, I think part of the complication with it was just having the other scanners take what's common in their base report formats and moving those all into the generic format. That's where the generic details field sort of spun out of that. I would still very much like to have well, I guess, could we also just not call it a generic schema? Could we just name it the general schema? Just give it a different name that's not generic. Would that avoid that problem too?
Naming.
Right? Then we wouldn't have to backport or do anything with it. But I would very much like to have some sort of format where people can incorporate tools that are not necessarily these traditional code security scanners. Come up with whatever you want, lightweight tooling. I think there's a lot of interesting use cases and benefits for that. But like you said, we don't have it now. And I think we can address those problems if they come up in the future. But yeah, for now, I'm happy to have the generic just be anything that goes in here. I'm also, I guess from a user perspective, I'm a little bit less worried about them getting sort of confused about the source, because ultimately, the customers are going to control their instance. They should know what they've named things. If they are creating custom integrations for something that could potentially cause a confusion, or they're using the APIs to import these vulnerabilities, I think ultimately they just need to know when they're trying to do the filtering, can they kind of get down to their method quickly?
I also considered that, because at some point I asked the question, do we want the GraphQL mutation to support arbitrary report types? And the question of differentiating between the manual vulnerabilities and the ones coming from scanners came up. And that's when we decided, okay, just stick the report type of generic for now, because at some point we actually might have a general schema for the vulnerabilities. But by the time we arrive at that schema, we will be able to migrate off the manual vulnerabilities. I was worried, because I was pretty much convinced you could fool the CI ingestion to create a different report type, like just taking the artifact file, modifying the scanner type inside the artifact file, and having GitLab ingest it. But I just tried doing that. I copy and pasted API fuzzing report, changed the scanner type inside the artifact to generic, but it didn't create a generic vulnerability. So we cannot, you cannot create a generic vulnerability in any other way done by using the GraphQL mutation. It's not possible. We have no, we don't have any loophole to allow for that.
Okay. Another question in the create. I'm just gonna share my screen so that we're on the same page. I think it's this one. Yeah, in this page, there is this detection method input, which is I think code review, and then there's probably something else that was designed for it. We will be able to filter by the detection method, right, Matt, in the vulnerability report?
Yeah, so this is where I think a clarification on design would be helpful. So the detection method is what I would expect to see each of the detection methods listed out under that heading of manual finding.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's why it's confusing, because right now we group by vendor type. Is it GitLab or is it a third party? And then it's by basically by schema, by report type. But this will be a heading that is the report type, which is the generic report type. We're going to call it manual finding. And then each of the detection methods is going to be the sub-selections.
So if we do that way, so we have where is that the initial design? I think it's the first page. Yeah, here. So in the scan type, it's going to be manual, and then there will be code review or other detection methods. But the thing is, this is the report type filter, and we will mix it with the detection method input. So it's going to be two filters combined. And code-wise, it's possible, but it's going to make it an ugly code.
My code is
so
slide 6. It shows this in more detail. Design 6.
Which one?
Design 6. I was asking Matt to scroll over to design 6. It illustrates this better. It shows that drop down with the values that you're talking about.
Gotcha. Oh, this is Savash driving now.
Yes.
Oh, sorry,
it's this
Savash.
one.
I thought it was still Matt. There. Thank you.
No problem. It's this one, right?
Yeah.
Oh, this is actually, I think this is the design for the page itself, the input page.
Yep, that's the drop down on the input. Like if you try to create a vulnerability manually, then
Okay.
that's
My
like a
mistake.
zoom in on the detection method.
Sorry about that.
And also ignore this, because as Mihao had schooled me on yesterday, I had forgotten about a 3-month-old issue where we clarified that none of these report types are going to be in there for the scanners, that this needs to be different as well.
So it's going to be just code review and external report. And the scanner types will not be.
You can look further down in the discussion. I outlined which detection methods we currently have.
Yeah, these ones. I guess.
If we want more, we can add more, no problem.
Okay. But yeah, so my concern is that we're gonna have one input here. I'm sorry. Yeah, one input here for two different filters. And that's gonna add a bit complexity.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was trying to explain earlier, was I wasn't sure how challenging or ugly that's going to be technically. But I guess thinking from a user's perspective, we don't want them to have to understand that these are two different things, right? Like I could know that I went for a scanner versus a manual input type. That's why I'm a little hesitant to split it out into two separate filters, because I wouldn't necessarily understand why they were separate things. And then you would get into weird combinations if we broke it out, like how would that behave if you had selected SAST as well as something in a different filter? Are you now anding those together so you would never see results like you would today?
Yeah. So would ideally we would have, so right now we have detection methods, but that's a new field, right? Mihao, we just introduced it, I guess.
We introduced it some time ago. The field is there,
but we never use it.
I don't think we use it at the moment. At least I can double check it, but I'm pretty much sure we don't.
So my I would expect that we have a report type that is, for instance, not generic, but it's like generic code review or generic whatever detection method we have. So we combine in the backend, we combine the detection method with the report type, so we don't have to do ugly things in the front end if we're going to have one filter, because otherwise it's going to be ugly. And ugly code means more bug, and more bug means less happy users. So more.
I believe that the easiest solution to this problem would be the backend would give you a list of, let's call them scan types to reflect this actual dropdown we have on the mock design.
Yes.
We would give you a list of scan types, and every item on that list would be the actual field name we're filtering against, and the second one would be the actual value. So for example, if you like click on the drop down, there you have SAST and you have code review. So SAST would be report type SAST, and code review would be detection method code review.
Yes,
And
this could,
then you would,
this could be also a solution.
yeah, the front end would, the user would click that, front end would give us the pair of, okay, so this particular filter is actually report type, but this particular filter is actually detection method. So this would be the simplest solution to this.
Yeah, like we do with the project filter. The project filter is populated by the backend. So we make a request to the backend and then retrieve the values, the items. So that could be a solution. And it could be, yes, it's much better than doing this hard coded.
Yep.
Do we need a new issue to represent this backend work that you just described?
I believe some backend work will be required, but I cannot say how much.
We need an issue to have that conversation, and now it seems
Yes,
like,
we need
right?
to have an issue to that conversation. Yep.
Okay. I'm not volunteering to create that issue. Who would like to create that issue? I'm looking at Mihao or Savash. One of the two of you I'm pointing.
I can do it. I can do it.
Thanks.
Trying
And,
to disappear into their virtual backgrounds.
I think I could. I think I can do that work, but are we planning to get these filters done this milestone?
Matt, I think that's a question for you.
I guess it depends on if we get the page itself done.
So the work as we'd broken it down was going to be done in this milestone, but I do believe that maybe we missed some work when we broke it down. I know that we've got the add a new vulnerability button and the new page creation, or the page to create it, but I didn't see any issues. And Savash, you can tell me I'm totally wrong about this, representing filter work.
Nope. But actually was thinking it's even better if I do it. I create the issue because this way, like the front end drives the request and the back end, so that there is more collaboration.
We give you what you want and you consume
exactly.
it.
Exactly. This is always the best scenario for front end back end collaboration. So I can do it happily, and I think we don't have an issue for that, Lindsay.
Thanks, Savash. And Matt, am I correct that we wouldn't want to add the create new vulnerability button to the report without the filter changes? Is that an iteration that we could add later, the filter work, or do they need to go hand in hand?
It'd be kind of clunky to not have the filter, but at the same time, it's probably not huge. I just thought of something, Savash and Mihao, again, if this is a terrible idea, please tell me, but to keep at least in the very short term, if it simplifies anything, since you're basing all of the current filters off of the report type, could you just have a single new entry based on the generic report type that just says manual finding, incorporate that into the list with our existing scanners, and then if you select that, it would just display anything. If it was code review, bug bounty, we would ignore
Detection
that,
method.
the detection method as a first pass, and then we could work to break that out separately with any backend changes in a future iteration. Does that simplify anything?
It's yeah, it would be perfect also for iteration.
I believe we currently expose the generic report type. So Savash, you might want to like verify that, but I think we basically, whenever we add a report type, we expose all of them at the same, at that point. I mean, when I added a generic report type, it should be exposed to the front end. I'm not sure if front end is consuming it, but I think it should show up in the list.
I can verify later, but
yep.
Should be. Yeah, I can verify it later. I can't say it by heart right now.
Okay. I mean, I think that would be a really good compromise between having no filter and having to do the additional work to separate it out by the individual manual detection methods. As long as you could just, filter, because let's be realistic, I think unless people are integrating with some very chatty external source, we're likely to only have a small handful. So just being able to filter out, just by manual, you're probably not going to see more than, I don't know, maybe a dozen or two, at least initially. So that should buy us plenty of time to make the filter experience better.
Yep. Shall I create one issue and then have a 2 steps implementation plan? Like first do, as you said, like just show the manual, and then the second step is working towards a dynamic scan type filter that is fetched by the backend. Or shall I create 2 issues for this?
Let's start with one, because I'm also completely making all this up. I have no idea what Andy's input is going to be on this. I know better than design stuff, so we can start there, and then he can help weigh in from a design perspective, because maybe he was thinking we stop at just manual finding and we don't go a step below that. Like I don't actually know what he was thinking on that, and if we need to split it out into a second one, we can.
All right, so I'm gonna add 1 issue and then drop a comment there somewhere, a created thread, just as a reminder for me in the future that Andy will take a look at the design, and if there is this code review, the detections method will be included in the filter, then we may consume this from the backend. So we need a separate issue for that. So just as a reminder, I'll drop a note.
I'm afraid we don't expose the generic as a tool. I just verified it locally, and I created a manual vulnerability, and the tool dropdown doesn't have generic there. So that might be a small change, I guess, but it's not there at the moment.
I think we hard code them, but I'm not sure. So if we hard code them, it's just one-liner.
Okay.
So we're pretty. Go ahead, Tosh. Sorry.
If we're not hard coding them, then it should be a one-liner in the backend.
We're pretty far over the end of our call, so I'm going to make sure that this recording also gets added to the issue that Savash creates for context and shared. And there is one item that Matt added just to look at async before the next call for a future planning breakdown around our JIRA issue integration. So just calling that out. It will show back up on this agenda next week. And thanks for the great
conversation. It was mostly for
conversation.
Mihao and Subhashis. That's one I've been having a side Slack discussion mostly with Mihao on, and a little bit of Tiago. It's a customer request. So it was something where we're going to see if we could get the quickest thing for them, since they're on .com and they can't do self-serve database query things.
Okay.
Sounds good.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.